It's difficult to describe until you've been through it, but you've been through it, and you know there is a gift of the presence of God that is available only through suffering. And it just doesn't come on the sunshine and ice cream days. It just doesn't. It comes through the hard. And for many people, through years of hard, but they come to know something of God that they would never trade otherwise. And Craig said that at the end of his cancer journey. Stacy's mom, Stacy found a note in her mother's Bible to the men and women of her parish. This is after she died of cancer. And she had written this beautiful note saying that the cancer was one of the most profound gifts of God because it opened her back up to love. Wow. And to being loved. There's deep mystery in that. And so we're back to the Mystics podcast, right? Mm-hmm. You can hear, like, if in the midst of really hard things, you can have God or you can have understanding. Most people want understanding. Choose God.
Yes. Right.
I'm telling you, choose God. Understanding is highly overrated. It doesn't deliver. It is the week of July 8th, and you have found your way back to the Wild at Heart podcast, and we're really glad that you have.
Yes.
Glad you're here. If you happen to notice the title, this is part 2 of a recap of the second quarter, because we just realized that the pace that we're all asked to live at, almost required to live at, and the amount of content and the madness of the world, it's just continually washing away so many good things that God is giving us from so many different places, including, we're hoping, this podcast is a source of nourishment for folks. What were you struck by in doing last week's recap? Before we go into this week's, I'm just curious about what effect did that have on you?
It stirred the hunger in me to stay in the message and the invitation to become an ordinary mystic. Because when we were talking about it, which was months ago, right, that stirring happened. But then so much of other things in life happened. And it felt like I lost a little bit of traction on that.
Of course.
And so what it did was it made me realize I'm so hungry for that. And I so want that. But the world and the enemy and our own fleshly, pursuits sabotage it every day. And so if we want to be an ordinary mystic, we have to make that a priority. That has to be the driving desire of our life, to do all of life with God. And so it was a reawakening back to that invitation.
Bravo. That's great.
How about you?
It accomplished its purpose then.
Yeah.
It was amazing for me. We are trying to slow everything down here at the Wild at Heart podcast. We're trying to take a soul's pace through a soul's portion, as Morgan would say, through content, whatever we're talking about. But I was struck last week, my earnest desire to help people into the experience of God that is laid out in the Old and New Testament by way of example. This life is available. My earnest desire to help people there, I keep trying to rush and fit more in. And so here's what I was remembering, Alan, is that it's about 2 weeks ago, I was trying to practice some time with God. And I asked Papa what he was saying to me. And he said, "You come to me too quickly. You move too fast through our time together. Slow down." And so I'm the guy who is banging the gong on this stuff and trying to sound the alarm and invite people, back into the sea of God. And I move too fast. So I was struck by that last week and went, okay. And we were asking people at the end. We did some listening. Sometimes we're doing a pause at the end now, as well as the beginning. And in that pause, like, what were you reminding me of, God? And he reminded me of that. He said, I told you. It wasn't I told you, it was I invited you to slow down in our time together.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to try and do that graciously this week. We have some more highlight reels going back through the second quarter and just picking up a few nuggets here and there to help you. And it may not even be the nuggets that we share that end up being meaningful to you. It may be the process, or it may be something else that you go, oh, that wasn't very significant for me. But that other thing that God said, great. Let's take our pause and breathe and get out of the madness of the world for a moment before we dive in. Will you pause with us? Father, Jesus, Holy Spirit, I give everyone and everything to you right now. Everyone, everything. What do I need to release today, God? What do I need to release, Jesus? Lord, I give you everything in order to come back into a centered place with you and me together in union. Breathe your life into me, breathe your love into me, and meet me here in this podcast. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay.
That was good.
That's good. So where do you want to start this week?
Well, I want to start with the podcast we did on summer soul care. It was actually a 2-part series with your wife, Stacy, and Stacy Burton from Wild at Heart. And it was a great just discussion of what do we hope for this summer? What do we need for this summer? How do we invite God into our summer? Now, I know at this point for this podcast, we're halfway through most people's summer. So yes, a great reminder.
Alan, I was already aware again this week of agreements that I'm making around summer and things I still need to break. So this is timely. I'm looking forward. Show us the highlight you picked.
Okay, let's take a look.
What do I need to release? And I was surprised that it was fear and pressure. And I need to take that off of my summer.
Oh, wow.
Just, like a fear that I'm going to waste it, fear that I'm not going to get, what I need. And then the pressure to make it happen. Just that, what I need is a big sigh and settling in. And yes, making the room for the simple things of after dinner, sitting on that porch, listening to crickets. That's life-giving to me.
The exhale thing, that and taking fear and pressure off, that's a really big idea because so many people that I know I've already been talking to about their plans. Hey, we're going to, we're doing this road trip and me and my friends, we're going to go do this thing. And people will say things in the midst of those conversations like, I really need this week to be good.
Yeah, pray this week is protected.
And you're already set up for failure, right? Because the fear and pressure are already on. Can we just say 1 week is not going to address the 51 weeks that you've been flogging the horse, right?
That's why you have to build in the margin and everything else.
Yeah. So taking fear and pressure off the summer just to begin with.
That's nice.
That's good stuff.
Yeah.
That's good stuff.
Yeah, for me, it's what I need is to see summer is a long game, meaning summer is several months.
There you go.
It's not the 1 week, flashy. When people say, what are you doing this summer? It almost feels like we all need something in our back pocket to pull out, like the Caribbean or, oh man, we're going fill in the blank, wherever.
Got this great Airbnb at the lake. Yeah.
Right. And the reality is that's not your summer. That's a couple of days that are probably a lot of joy, but a lot of money, a lot of planning, a lot of bandwidth that causes tension and stress and expectations, which great, like do that week or do those 2 weeks, but that's not your summer. That's a blip. And so, yeah, I feel like for me, God is saying,
good.
look at the long game. It's not a day. It's not a week in June or July. It's several months. And now how can you pace your summer where there's joy and just restoration throughout on the ordinary days, on the empty, calendar days where there's nothing scheduled, as well as the beach or wherever else you're going. And that feels like the pressure's off for me. Like I can exhale, Stacy, to your, earlier comment. Like when I think of it that way, pressure's off, and I look forward to it.
Man, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that, Ellen.
Play the long
Yes.
game. Oh, that's so good. Like that's enough. We could almost just say, okay, it's a 9-minute podcast this week, folks. Like just remember those simple things. I also want to do a series next year. Would you remind me?
Yeah.
We need to do a series next year on how to use your Sabbath time, whatever it may be. If you get 2 weeks vacation, far out, some people get more. Some of our European friends, they have very generous policies and they're getting 6 weeks off, 8 weeks off. Some folks get a weekend here and there. I want to teach people how to use it because I'm just coming off of one. So here's the story that you haven't heard yet. So we went 2 weeks, celebrate our 40th, which was actually last October, but Stacy was in Wales putting on a conference, and then she came home and we put on survival school, and
Wow.
which is fine. We've given our anniversary to captivating retreats for about 20 years. We said, what do you want to go on your 40th? And she said, I want to go to the Outer Hebrides off the coast of Scotland. So we just got back, not just got back, but we went, came back. It was so informative, Alan, of things I want to help people with, because the problem is once you get there, you are faced in a non-loud environment with the condition of your soul.
Give me an example.
Well,
of
okay.
that.
So here's the story I wanted to tell you.
Yeah.
So I had a half a day set aside to go fly fishing. We're really looking forward to this. Brown trout, fly fishing. It's one of my joys. And Stace was great. She's like, take all the time you need. So I had 4 hours on a stream, just myself, doing something I enjoy immensely. Alan, I did not enjoy it until the last 30 minutes.
Wait, why? Why is that?
I couldn't have told you. I couldn't have told you until the last 30 minutes. Like I was there. It was beautiful. I was enjoying the beauty. I wasn't upset. I wasn't mad. There wasn't trauma going on in our world at the moment. But I could just tell it felt mechanical. It felt clunky. I noticed I normally enjoy this more. I normally find this more nourishing.
Yes.
And when I finally got to the point that it was nourishing and enjoyable, I realized, oh, John, it's simply the condition of your soul. You can't expect to rush in out of the madness of what most people have to live, at the pace of life and the amount of work and the things expected of all of us. You just can't. It doesn't happen like that. You don't rush into vacation and suddenly be in the place that you are at the end of vacation. It takes the full Sabbath period, whether you have a weekend or a week or two or a sabbatical. It takes the period of time to get your soul better. And so for me, I was like, holy cow, it took me 3.5 hours of I was moving slow.
Yeah.
I'd sit down once in a while, look around, smell the roses. And even then, it was just the condition of my soul. So I guess I just wanted to add that to the summer soul care.
That's a huge insight. And Stacy was telling me while you were on vacation when she got back, she was saying, I brought all these books to read, but the first few days I couldn't even open the books because my mind was still racing.
Yep.
I wasn't fully settled.
Yep.
And it just felt too much. I needed to give myself space before I could enter into that part of the joy.
Yep. Yep. So I did one thing really well. I built in lingering mornings. And we were with some friends for most of the time. And I just said, hey, everybody, let's just all agree that whatever we're going to go do today, take a hike, go to the beach, whatever, we're not going to do it until late morning. That everybody has their own morning and their own pace to do whatever you want to sleep in, you want coffee in bed. That was a really good decision, because the other thing I was aware of is we bring the pace of life into vacation, and then we do vacation at the same pace. Wow. So it's like, let's get to that cool coffee shop and get those really awesome croissants they have. And then let's get some bikes and right?
Yeah. Oh, it can turn joy into exhaustion.
Right.
Really quick. And one thing I just wanted to offer the listeners too is, I know you're hearing that excerpt in July, beginning of July.
Yeah.
But you can still play the long game. Like, don't buy into, well, gosh, but now my summer's half over.
That's good.
And it's too late. Like, there is the long game of looking at all the time you have left and taking the pressure off and asking God, what does your soul need?
Ding, 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 ding. Especially that question. It's never too late to ask God, what do you have for me today? It's Sunday, and after church, I've got the whole rest of the day. Lord, what do you have for me? Mm-hmm. Just to ask the simple question will bring you back to nourishment, care, provision. That's good. Okay, so that's the first clip in our second quarter recap here. And then we mentioned the Sam Jolman podcast that we did last week. Phenomenal conversation on his new book on male sexuality, which is, oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed I can't remember it. What's the name of the book?
Oh, The Sex Talk You Never Got.
Thank you. Sam, I'm sorry. There it is, right? There's the thing about you have all this content and then it just washes away. The Sex Talk You Never Got. Yeah. I want to flag that for folks. Yes. Phenomenal podcast if you didn't see it. Phenomenal book if you haven't yet got it. But we wanted to go into 3 snippets from a series we did on the Wild at Heart story.
Right.
Not because I like rolling out our home movies. That's not the point of this at all. But because they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb, by the word of their testimony, and they did not love their lives so much so as to shrink from death. I never really understood that second part. What does it mean to overcome through the power of testimony? Well, one of the ways is what we do here is as we tell stories through the year of God at work, it envisions and empowers and reminds and strengthens and restores faith and hope. So that's what I want to do with these 3. So what did you choose as the first clip?
Yeah, the first clip is a great glimpse into how it all began in terms of the first book, The Sacred Romance, how that came into being, because really that set the foundation in so many ways for the message of Wild at Heart.
Yeah, big time.
And still does today. We're about to relaunch The Sacred Romance in a few months. But I wanted to show this clip because it's a beautiful story that you told about you and Brent and how that almost, I'm talking about the book now, the book almost didn't happen.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Let's hear it.
Okay.
Even as I went to become a therapist at school, I knew that my career would not be a therapist. I could sense that God had something for us that was still centered around that labrie of the heart. Mm-hmm. And I wanted more understanding of the heart and human transformation and healing and that sort of thing. So meet Brent Curtis. I first see him as a therapist myself. I saw him as a client. We become fast friends. And he had gone through the program. He was still very involved with it as well. And we start doing a series of lectures together at Glen Eyrie here in Colorado Springs called The Sacred Romance. And it was primarily for our clients and our friends. And so Sunday evenings.
Yeah, Sunday evenings, head over there. 12 weeks.
Yeah.
Somebody was doing the recording on the tapes. I can't remember who, but this was the the revolutionary time of using clips to highlight.
Yes.
Having the VHS all queued up to the right moment. Yeah.
Yep. So we're giving these lectures, and Brent and I are sitting in a coffee shop here in Colorado Springs. And Brent says, I think we ought to write a book on this. And I'm like, you're out of your mind. I said, I am working full time. I'm still finishing grad school. We have 3 young boys. I'm like, that's madness.
And you're traveling on the weekends for work.
That's right.
So it was so intense.
It was so intense. And so I said, no, that's crazy. And I remember walking out of the coffee shop and back to my old Jeep Wagoneer. And this is in the day of keys. I put my key in my car. Before I open the door, God speaks. And we are just beginning to learn that God speaks.
Okay.
And he says, that was a really bad decision. That's all I hear. And I'm like, whoop, okay. So I walk back in, sit there. He's still sitting at the table in there. I come back in, sit down and go, okay, I'm in. And so we wrote The Sacred Romance in 96.
Yeah.
It came out in 97. Yeah. And it, we were unknown. We were just 2 therapists from Colorado putting a book out, and God began something. There's something about that you enjoy. What is it?
It's imagining you and Brent in a coffee shop talking together and trying to put words and language to what is this stirring? What is this Narnia wardrobe door that we're being pulled into from, ancient scripture as well as theologians throughout time, but also what you and Brent were feeling as counselors and as followers of God, which is there's got to be more. And why is this story so opposed? And so the message of the arrows, that our hearts are good and our hearts matter, like all of that, I just would love to have been a fly on the wall and have heard the riffing back and forth and the excitement and but it's not that, it's this.
Yep.
And so I wanted listeners to just be brought back into that moment and to realize your first response about the book was, no.
Totally. Yeah. People ask me, like, how did you become an author? Was this something that, you went to school for and dreamed of all your life? And I'm like, no, I really kind of fell into it and then discovered that, Gerard Manley Hopkins' line, what I do is me, for this I came. Like some people find their calling later in life. But I want to add something to this. So Stacy and I were with some friends over dinner, and she put a question out on the table. Sometimes we'll use what our friend Jan calls table questions, and we'll put a question on the table just to get the conversation out of weather and chit chat and how are your kids and how's work into something a little more meaningful. Here's the question she threw out on the table, and Alan, it goes perfectly with this clip. The question is, can you think back on some small decisions in your life that ended up having massive consequences?
That's a great question.
We had a phenomenal, 2 hours go by at this dinner that we're at this restaurant because people started going, wow, wait a second. Yes, I remember. And it went back to, how did you meet? Or how did you meet Christ? Or these little decisions like that one where God says, you made it. That was a terrible decision not to write that book. Go back in, so I went back in, we wrote the book, and then here we are, right? So that'd be a fun thing for people to do.
Yes, really fun. And thank you for not only being the kind of man that chose to listen to God's voice, but when you heard it, you didn't dismiss it. You didn't just go, yeah, no, we'll talk about it later, God. Like to be the kind of man that heard that and immediately turned and went back in. Like,
I'm not a saint.
No.
I just am not an idiot. Okay. It's like, are you kidding me? When the living God tells you to do something, do it. Right.
So what was his expression when he looks up and sees you come in?
He just cracked up. He was very, very gracious. Yeah. So we jumped in. And the thing is, this is also the kindness of God. Most of us very naturally want God to give us a bigger picture of our life. Like, where am I going to be in 5 years? And what should we be heading towards, and planning and that sort of thing. And I mean, we'd love to see the story of our life if we could. But actually, you don't want that. Now in my 60s, looking back on the journey of these 30 years, holy cow, like the reason that God in his kindness often doesn't tell us what's coming is because we don't have the grace for it yet. I'm a different man now than I was at 32, and I'm a better father, than I was then. And I'm a better husband, I hope, than I was then. Like, we mature, we grow. And so God in his kindness also doesn't tell us how costly it's going to be.
And that's why I want to show this next clip, because it touches on, yes, there's been the beauty and the joy and the wildness of all that God did to start this ministry. And for you and Stacy, especially at the tip of the spear of the ministry, it's been really costly. So this is a really beautiful clip about that.
Okay. We were talking about the first century church comparisons last time, because there is a cost to this. There is a cost, and it has been joy unspeakable. It's been impact beyond what anyone could dream of. And you are not spared the heartache of life because you are following God.
Okay. If they say now mic drop, like that sentence is huge.
Yeah.
You are not spared the heartache of life because you're following God.
But what you are given is God.
Yes.
And I remember after losing Craig, I remember God saying to me, he said, John, you can have me or you can have understanding. If you insist on understanding, you will lose both. Wow. And it's true. Like, if you just demand why, I don't know why. Timing, I don't understand it. Regrets, all of that. But the Isaiah 61 promise, the reason that verse is so central to our ministry, I've come to heal the brokenhearted and set the captive free, is because we have been rescued by it.
Yes.
God does heal broken hearts.
Yes.
He does. There's an interesting part of the story that we didn't talk about, and I don't know that I've told you, Alan. Brent and I, Sacred Romance came out. It began to have influence, and we're seeing our clients get better. We're seeing a lot of our clients struggle with very, very, very difficult things, childhood trauma. And I can remember the moment. I can remember the intersection. Isn't that interesting? Like, I can remember the stoplight where we were seated, and we were riffing about all of this. And here's what we concluded. We said, you know what? The church in the coming years is going to need a theology of suffering. And they're going to need training in spiritual warfare. And wow, is that proven true for everyone we know personally? I mean, I may not be able to universalize that, but for everybody we know, holy cow, man, suffering will throw you. It throws you hard. And not just your own suffering, but the suffering of those you love, right? So as you watched, Chase go through that really hard season he was in, and you've watched Hope go through that really rough first year at school. Right. It's harder on you in some ways than it is on them. However suffering comes to us, it throws you hard. If you do not have a story for it, if you don't have a context and a place to go with it.
Yes.
Right?
Totally. And I think of so many friends some who have come to Colorado for our ministry or our mission, and a few years later, they're back to where they were.
Yeah.
in another state or back to their former life. And in big and small ways, I think the sense is when it becomes super hard and costly, people begin to question, is God really in this?
Did I
What
make a
was I
terrible
thinking?
decision?
Right.
Sure.
And
Yep.
miss that. No, it's just when you are walking with God and trying to bring the kingdom here in various ways for people, it will be opposed. It will be opposed, and there will be scars and cost. But the invitation is stay in what God is calling you in, regardless of the circumstances, of the highs or the lows or the good or the bad, or, whatever it is. And I think watching that clip of you and Stacy and knowing more of the story from what you've told me, and also what those episodes show, is just your willingness to persevere and stay with it because of the trueness of it and the conviction that this is what God has given us, no matter what we face.
Yeah. And that he will not only meet you in your suffering, but he is enough. He is. It's difficult to describe until you've been through it, but you've been through it, and you know there is a gift of the presence of God that is available only through suffering. And it just doesn't come on the sunshine and ice cream days. It just doesn't. It comes through the hard. And for many people, through years of hard, but they come to know something of God that they would never trade otherwise. And Craig said that at the end of his cancer journey. Stacy's mom, Stacy found a note in her mother's Bible to the men and women of her parish. This is after she died of cancer. And she had written this beautiful note saying that the cancer was one of the most profound gifts of God because it opened her back up to love. Wow. And to being loved. There's deep mystery in that. And so we're back to the Mystics podcast, right? You can hear, like, I said that quote, in the midst of really hard things, you can have God or you can have understanding. Most people want understanding. Choose God.
Yes. Right.
I'm telling you, choose God. Understanding is highly overrated. It doesn't deliver.
Right.
But God does. Yeah. I think the other thing that's helpful about that clip, and then we're going to show one more, is when Stacy and I got married, and this was part of the stories, if people listen into that series, we didn't have a dime. We ate off a card table that was loaned to us by her mom for 10 years.
10 years.
First 10 years of our married life. Like, we were poor. And our kids need to hear that story because now we're not. We have 2 cars. We have a nice home. But you have to live through those years. I wouldn't trade those years for anything. And somebody gave us a television and then it got stolen. And we had nothing. And God was in that. Well, it's also good to hear about the suffering piece, because I think people can look at the ministry of Wild at Heart and if they read something, hear something, attend, something, you see the beauty and the goodness and you experience, I hope, the beauty and the goodness of God. And you can forget, like children do of their parents, you can forget, there's more to this story here at Wild at Heart. And there has been an enormous cost to this. We don't talk about it. But people need to know that because it will help them interpret their own story, right? Nobody gets this really cool life without suffering.
And you don't really want to trust the man or woman in big responsibilities of life that haven't gone through the forging of the hard days. If it's been a life of ease, a life of simplicity, a life of, automatic, this happens and then this happens, and it's like the golden path. Those aren't the people that you want to turn to.
They're not the people you call at 2 a.m.
No.
Yeah. That's really good. Okay, one more.
Yeah.
One more. And this is neat because we were talking about the vacation we were just on.
Mhm.
We were in the Outer Hebrides,
Yeah.
and we were visiting some of these ancient chapels. Well, that is connected to the journey of Iona.
Yes.
And so let me just clarify that story real quick for folks. So Patrick brought Christianity to Ireland when Ireland was a savage nation. It was the warring Celtic tribes. Rome has fallen. Europe goes into chaos. God preserves the Christian message and basically civilization's manuscripts through the Irish monks. It's a phenomenal story. You can read Thomas Cahill's book on it called How the Irish Saved Civilization. But what happens is these Irish missionaries start coming out of Ireland back to Europe to reconvert Europe. And it's an extraordinary story. And actually, if you tour through Europe, some of the most famous universities and university towns and monasteries and cathedrals were formed by these early missionaries who were coming out to risk death to bring the gospel to the world. Some of them went to the Picts, who were in Braveheart when they paint their faces blue. Well, those were actually real folk, and they were in Scotland. They were the only people Rome couldn't conquer. And so they just built Hadrian's Wall. So this is a fierce people. Well, these guys risked life and limb to bring the gospel there and converted many people. It's just a beautiful story. So not long ago, we were in some of those ruins and retracing that story. And what we're going to tell in this clip, I think, is a little bit of the Iona story.
Yes.
So there's a picture of Iona in the lobby downstairs. And because we went there on a pilgrimage, Stace and I actually went back again. And the first time we were there, when I felt so moved to go there, so I'm sitting outside the Abbey on a bench and kind of waiting. It was a lovely visit, but I didn't, see Jesus walk across the downy tundra. And so I'm sitting on this bench and I'm going, okay, I'm here. What would you like to say? God says, I'm doing this again. And by that, story of Iona was Rome had fallen, Europe had gone into chaos. It had gone into absolute paganism. And what had been an era of Christendom was over. Christianity was preserved in this little outposts of these Irish monasteries. And then it was those folks who began first to Iona and evangelizing Scotland, then England, then Europe. They brought Christianity back.
And they were called warrior monks.
Yeah, warrior monks.
Yeah.
I love that phrase.
And Jesus said, I'm doing that again. And so he is, and we are all, everybody, we are all a part of this. We call it the fellowship of the heart. You are in the fellowship of the heart. And those who love God and want union with him, not just Sundays, but a life in him, and are exploring all that his kingdom has to offer. And then carrying it into the world and rescuing far more hearts and lives than we will ever touch are being reached right now by all our friends out there. So it's a beautiful story.
So the reason, John, that this particular clip that we're ending on just made me smile so much, and to hear it again and to share it again with listeners, is you and Stacy were invited to begin something, really step into something that's been going on through the ages, but that's been lost and forgotten by much of our current world, even the church. And what I love is, as you two stepped into it, then others are invited to be part of this fellowship of the heart.
Yep.
And so I just enjoyed the way the Wild at Heart story concludes, where we are up to this moment in it is a shared journey and mission with everyone watching, everyone listening. You're a part of this.
Absolutely.
And it is something extremely unique. It's what we talk about a lot, that the enemy most opposes intimacy with God.
Yeah.
And so when you are after the life of the heart, it will be opposed But there's nothing better. There's nothing more important to have in your life, right, than that union with God.
Yes. Yeah. To know Jesus as he truly is,
Yes.
to know Papa as he truly is, to know the Holy Spirit and his help in your life, to experience all of the kingdom that we can experience this side, to know that you are part of a fellowship. I'm thinking of that beautiful line where in The Lord of the Rings, Samwise says to Frodo, and as things are beginning to kind of get gnarly and they are entering Mordor, he says, I wonder what sort of story we've fallen into, Mr. Frodo.
Mm.
Yeah, Alan, just for you to say, we are all part of a story. We share this with you, friends. It's why we do what we do. We are the fellowship of the heart, and we love it. We love it with you. We love this shared life together and advancing the kingdom and healing hearts and rescuing lives together all over the world. And so to our friends all around the world, thank you. Thank you for saying yes. Thank you for what you're doing with Jesus in your world. Things that look small, things that might look amazing, all of it. Thank you. Like, we love you and we love doing this life together. We hope these 2 weeks of review have been helpful, if only to get you into the pattern of remembering.